We're having this event on the stolen land of the Gunai-Kurnai Nation. It has not been ceded. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Yeah. Then I'd like to mention that there is an attendance book in the front gallery where Pat's work is. And the family would very much appreciate it if you signed that book. Talking with Wilva really appreciates when we had the event for Anton to be able to look back and reflect. And you'll be there at the same time. You'll see this beautiful rose. It's a Madonna rose. It was a gift to Pat from Golly and Claire. Where are they? Yeah, there they are, right? And it's a special thing that I'm embarrassed I sort of lost the track of why it's so special, but it is pretty. And it is actually symbolizes it represents the goddess of wisdom, which is apropos. Well, first I'll speak for all of us here. Yeah. To Mick and Wilva and Louisa and Danny, Tolly, and the kids. Where's Tomase? Oh, there he is. Yeah, great. We just want to say we're so sorry for your loss. And it's our loss, yeah. We lost our leader. We're shocked. We're going, what? Huh? Hang on. We lost our leader. Pat Waters was our leader. She was never an elected representative. And let's face it, those people aren't really our leaders anyway. Pat was a real leader. A leader offers direction to move forward in our culture, knowing full well that if we don't move forward, we're moving backwards. And then a leader, in order to provide that direction, needs to create an inspirational vision and then work to motivate and inspire us to share and live that vision. Pat did the work. She lived by example. Integrity, hard work, always pushing for justice and equality, fair go. And she thought it through with that keen intellect, always researching, reading and writing. Keep going, dig deeper. And of course, there was her irrepressible activism on every aspect of culture. Art, education, the politics of war and immigration, human rights, the environment. Pat made us think and talk about stuff even if we didn't really want to. Yeah. We're gathered here today. The family and some friends will speak about their personal relationship with Pat. And Pat was personal. Pat nurtured her personal relationships. We all have stories to tell about Pat, and we will tell each other those stories from now on. But let's not forget the vision that Pat had about the whole, the individual's relationship to the whole, the relationship that we have with humanity. That was Pat's vision. We're here in a Pat way. Lots of food, lots of drink, and lots of drink. We're here to affirm the values, the principles, and the vision that Pat lived for. And when we do that, it gets us together. She'd love that. We lost a leader. We're sad. But she was a good leader. So we're not lost.
Thanks, Colin. I don't have to. Do I have to speak into that or not?
Yeah.
Oh,
Get it down, please.
thank you.
Do you want to put it on there, or do you need that or not?
No.
Well, we'll get rid of that.
Yeah. I can't get close to people today because I have a friend who's just been diagnosed with COVID. So, virtual hugs to everyone. Now, my darling sister, I believe I can claim to have known her longer than anyone here, and for most of that time, somehow or another, we have managed to live close together with our families. And as a kid, I called her Patty, and I always will. I cannot explain how important she was in my life. She had wisdom and integrity and was the most ethical person I've known. She came to be the person she was by her own studies and reading. Admirable, as she had to overcome a tough childhood, which she forged through to rise above our dysfunctional family. Consequently for her, her most important thing, a core value, was to create her own beautiful family, whom we all know and love and have enjoyed over the years. We are bereft and in shock. I am so proud of her. At St. Aloysius College in North Melbourne, at 15 years of age, I think, she became dux of the school, even though she did not have an actual normal home. The nuns were quite keen on recruiting her for the church. Fortunately, Mick came along. She was 16. Then a 57-year-long love affair began. We were all doing the young couple thing, working, travelling, having parties. Patty and Mick scraped up a deposit on their first home and began renovating at the same time as working, and did I mention throwing parties. When babies came along, ideas of living differently began to percolate. We became interested in self-sufficiency and voluntary simplicity and living in the bush. It took a while, but we eventually all made it to Briag. The house building began. Oh, the building years. Off-grid and up at Paddymellon Gully. We met lots of like-minded mates, the owner builders of course, and threw a few more parties. Then down to the big smoke of Briagolong. Beautiful homes, beautiful memories, including everyone here. During all of this, Patty's art flourished, and you all know her odyssey of being an inspiring art teacher and mentor. Later, Patty and Mick started the Briagolong School of Fine Art, which was highly successful. They loved it all. We have lost Patty, Digger, Mum, too soon. Our lives have changed and our hearts are aching. I'd like to finish with a quote given to us by a lovely neighbour, which I believe relates to Patty. from the Irish poet John O'Donoghue. The mystery and magic of being an individual is to live life in response to the deep call within, the call to become who we were dreamt to be. Paddy heard and answered that call. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilva.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Now I'd like to ask Danny and Louisa to come up.
Hello everyone. Closer? Can you hear me? Okay. So the task at hand is to summarise a life so richly lived and one which touched so many. It seemed impossible when I began, but as soon as I started typing, the words came swiftly. I hope it was her with me guiding every stroke. I know she would have liked a modicum of control. In fact, I know that she was with me because this is not short. So from the beginning, as Wilva touched on, when Mum reflected on her childhood, she used to say it was like watching a movie, so far removed from the life that she led. It was like this because it was a childhood filled with trauma. We don't need to dwell there because she wouldn't want us to, and further, it didn't define her. In fact, she became the person that she was in spite of her rough beginnings. But through this childhood, she escaped with her education, reading books, and she escaped with her sister Wolva. There's a painting in there of Wolva, Mum, and the girl next door who would together climb out of their bedroom windows in the middle of the night, adorn themselves with capes, and go about putting bad to rest and doing good deeds. There wasn't much to be done at that time of the night in reality, but their active imaginations enabled a different story to the one they were actually living. Mum stepped out of the movie when she met Dad, age 16, and the real love story began. It would be Dad who would meet Mum serendipitously, and she obviously wanted to impress him because rather than confess she was a 16-year-old student, she told him that she was a student teacher. Their romance began when Dad took her to dinner and a show, My Fair Lady. Mum had never been to dinner or a show. And after a while, the truth began to unfold, her age and her home life. But Dad was already devoted and saved both her and Wolva, both literally escaping them and setting them up in their own little flat. Dad would continue to support Mum as she did the hard working through of trauma, a mission that would last her lifetime, but she committed to it like any other cause that she undertook, in order to not only make a better life for herself, but to make a better life for us all. Their love blossomed in the 1960s and they would marry in 1965. True to the decade's reputation, they partied hard but also embedded themselves into the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War protests, women's liberation, and Mum was at the forefront of the rallies, protests and campaigns. They lived in Melbourne and Dad supported her as a sales rep while Mum went to art school and got her teaching qualification. Firstly, there was a short stint at Strathmore High where she met the lovely Jo Beams, who is the friend who is now isolating, who's going to play a song today, and she's regrettably not here. But Mum's first big posting was at the infamous Brighton Tech. At the time, she was not allowed to wear trousers, only knee-length skirts. But Mum was from the outset a trailblazer. I remember her telling me how the students were rough and she would use meditation to settle them, a technique which was frowned upon by this administration, too unconventional, and she was asked to stop. If only they knew how common such practices would become. With her colleagues, she would lobby to wear pants and receive equal pay, and Mum would adopt meditation as a lifelong practice. Being as unconventional as they were for the time, Mum and Dad decided not to start a family before they'd travelled and lived a bit. And they set off to Europe for 6 months in a dilapidated combi van. Mum was exposed to the masters of the Western art canon, exposed to the painterly surfaces and the colour qualities, which had previously been denied to her in books. From this experience, Mum developed a mantra which was travel is the best education. And later, rather than taking Danny and I to the Gold Coast for a movie world experience, they would travel us internationally. Together, Mum and Dad would share a love of travel, and in turn they would share it with many others to come. Upon their return in the 1970s, the hippie movement was in full swing, and after Danny was born, Mum, Dad, Wolver and Anton together decided to do what they called at the time dropping out, a back to the land movement that refused the onset of modern progress, capitalism and fast food chains. They moved to the bush to build mud brick houses, sourcing all the materials from the land or second-hand and beginning that self-sufficient off-grid lifestyle. Mum would often tout proudly how their first home only cost $7,000 to build. And Mum brought her activism with her, becoming the leader of the peace movement in Gippsland, so dedicated to the cause of peace that my brother was denied toy guns. A decision which would backfire when Mum held a major rally at Paddy Mellon Gully with dignitaries, politicians and the vanguard. Danny, aged circa 4 or 5, had secretly constructed a toy gun made from polypipe and discarded timber. He took up a position on the mezzanine floor, sniper's position, and started shooting everyone one by one. But Mum, she was always learning stuff from every experience, and from that, she said, if we're denied the opportunity to explore the shadow side of humanity, then it will likely come out in more destructive ways. He later got a slug gun. They were also seminal in mobilising the owner-builders movement, which would lobby for the individual's right to build your own home, dismantling council legislations to make way for their visions and build homes communally. Their time at Paddy Mellon Gully was seminal, filled with music, art and meaningful work. Mum would fall in love with the bush, and her modernist art teaching and penchant for abstraction would be supplanted by landscape, although not traditional. What she sought to capture was the mystery of the bush. As they built houses, Dad was in the Briagolong Bush Band and Mum was teaching at Maffra High, and all the while maintaining that self-sufficient lifestyle with Wolf and Anton. They would host solstices, swim naked in the Freestone Creek and try for another baby. I was from the outset stubborn and hard-pressed to come, and just as they were about to give up, 5 years after Danny, Mum would fall pregnant. I would come early, a sick little prem baby, but that caused her a fair bit of stress. But I think I was just forewarning her, as I obviously knew then that my precociousness and stubbornness would continue to cause her stress for a good deal of time to come. They lived at Paddy Mellon Gully for another 2 years, but after a car accident which took the 4 of us off the cliff, it would stir an anxiety that would see them move closer to town. That anxiety would haunt Dad for the rest of their lives together, so they made a pact that if Mum was ever going to be late home, she would ring to reassure him. They found 90 Landy Lane, Briagolong, a sanctuary for one of the last surviving red gum forests that once travelled episodically from Mallacoota to Warragul. With gums hundreds of years old and an open forest, Mum fell in love with her forever home. At the time, her gift as a teacher did not go unnoticed. It was the early 80s and she had been headhunted to establish the East Gippsland TAFE Art School. It would be one of the first of its kind. In fact, the first time she met Anne Greenwood, her future colleague, who would become a lifelong soulmate, they were having lunch in Sale together, and they witnessed the peculiar scene of a Melbourne tram travelling by semi through the streets of the town. "That's our tram," Mum exclaimed. They bought their Melbourne tram to live in while Dad set about again building house number 2. I have memories of Mum painting and drawing the gum trees on an easel outside the tram. The tram not only housed us in those early days, but also for the last decade of Mum's life became her idyllic studio. Anne and Mum would bond deeply through their years teaching at TAFE. It was through Anne that Mum discovered Jungian psychology, seminal to Mum's healing of the shadow, but also her practice as it led to dreams becoming the subject matter of her work. Together they would share a love for art and inspire countless students. Mum would bring her passion for social justice to TAFE, heading up the union and ensuring the EBA promised good conditions. She was such a dedicated teacher, my mum, I remember her sitting at the dinner table with piles of student journals that she'd brought home, reading every page of every one, offering notes and feedback for hours into the night, days at a time. I also remember Dad greeting her at the door with every night she got home with a glass of wine and dinner underway. Many art teachers don't have time or energy to practice, but Mum was a committed artist with a supportive husband who lived her own doctrine of drawing one thing every day and spending at least one day a week in the studio. And when we moved into Mud Brick House number 2, she allocated one of the mezzanine rooms. The house smelt of terps and oil paint, which you might all reel at, but for me it triggers nostalgic homely feelings. That coupled with the smell of Dad browning onions and garlic on the stove with the jazz track playing, and again delivering Mum a glass of wine at 5:30 p.m. on the dot. was a joyous childhood memory. As Danny and I grew, Mum supported the family financially while Dad was one of the first stay-at-home dads in the district. A decision that was both economically viable but also suited their support of women's liberation and Mum's desire to do meaningful work. At my recent 40th birthday, Mum began her speech. She loved a good speech, as you can see, and I feel her hovering. Anyway, she started with a joke. I failed as a mother. She talked about how she didn't sew like the other mums and couldn't bake as she presented her lovingly made chocolate ripple cake, her very successful and much loved cheats cake. But she didn't fail as a mother, obviously, she just worked in different ways. I remember when Danny finally decided to knuckle down at high school and focus in VCE, she would get him out of bed every morning at 6 a.m, sit with him if needed and support him at any point of his study. For me, as I dropped out of high school at the end of year 10, she supported me to get into art school instead of doing VCE. And I remember those years at TAFE, going to TAFE so fondly, every day travelling in together. The end of the day, having dinner with Dad, and then in summer, we would sit on the patio talking late into the evening, and in winter we'd sit in front of the fire and do the same, as many of you have done here too. As we matured into young adults, she guided us with philosophy, Jungian psychology, global politics, and just her humaneness and compassion. She always advocated for our voices to be heard. There was never a children's table in our house, and Mum would often be heard shouting over the throng, the chair acknowledges Danny or Louisa. She was a good talker herself. The air was rarely filled by an awkward silence in her company. She was just too interested in everything and everyone and had to verbalise that interest. She left TAFE to establish the Briagolong School of Fine Art with Dad, teaching quarterly terms. Many of the students who had been repeat offenders at TAFE followed her to the Briagolong Hall to feed from her further. They ran years of summer schools which would bring incredible artists to the region, further providing for a hungry arts community. They would develop lifelong friendships and inspire many people to move to Briagolong. In fact, that goes back to Paddy Mulling days. Their love for travel was again fulfilled with study tours in Europe, so well enjoyed that people would come time and again. The first tours were just tours, but Mum, always moving people to practice, made them working trips. As Dad noted, she would have them sitting in the gutter in some Venetian alleyway sketching, or from the bus window mixing colour palettes. So dedicated to teaching, and this was before smartphones or common internet use, so she would travel with one tiny suitcase and one extra large suitcase filled with all her books, with all the relevant pages marked. So if they were heading to the Louvre the next day, Mum would sit up and reread all the relevant literature that she was going to approach on the tour. She wasn't supposed to do this, of course. You get into trouble. The Louvre doesn't let any old hack just run a tour, and one of the delights of her time travelling was to receive a name badge saying Louvre Guide. They ran these tours for 10 years, sometimes taking 2 a year. They never sought to make any real money from art school. They only ever eked away a humble living doing exactly what they loved to do. Mum was the driving force, but Dad was their solid support, not dissimilar to a painting. From the Briagolong art school, the Briagolong Art Gallery was born, and although Mum was always involved, she never laid claim to it. She was proud that the students formed a collaborative cohort which would run an artist-run space and offer so much to the community that she loved. She retired fully just in time when Danny and Tale gave birth first to Tamazi and then Lysani. She became a committed, doting grandmother, and the two children brought her endless joy and pride. But she still continued her practice and tireless work of advocacy for social justice, in particular asylum seekers, and for the environment with care. And in turn, these causes formed the basis of her work, her art practice. And in 2018, she had a major retrospective at the Gippsland Art Gallery where Simon Gregg, the director, wrote in his foreword to her catalogue that she was the matriarch of contemporary art in Gippsland. She was never comfortable with such accolades, but I could tell this time she was secretly proud. The exhibition was stunning and, as many people noted, transformative for viewers. She had that impact on people. When the art group congregated after hearing of her passing, Jill Klein noted that she had transformed the lives of everyone there in one way or another, and she was the reason many were doing what they were doing. And Dad was so proud after the retrospective that he decided once it came down, he would remove their diverse collection of art from their walls and replace it all with Mum's work, an homage to his loving wife. And it's difficult for me to imagine a world where the two of you are not side by side. 4 days before my mum died, I had my 40th birthday party, and it was a typical Waters Teas affair, cross-generational, loads of food and wine, and Mum, Wolver and I worked in the kitchen all day prepping food. The party was a success, but the highlight for me now was the moment that Mum and Dad got to hold their audience captive. Firstly, with Dad playing some of my favourite tunes, Mum watched him with as much pride as Dad has always shown her. And then Mum giving her talk in the same way she's always captivated people for years. And Wolver sharing in the moment, and I'm so pleased that she got to have one last party before she left. It was one of her favourite things to do. There was no sign of illness. In fact, on the morning of her dying, Dad said that they'd had a great morning. It started off with too much information for Danny and I, not to mention the broader public. Then she said about her day. She started off by sending me a text message reminding me to drop some work in. You know, she was always worried about her memory in the later years, but I think she spent so much time reminding all of us of so much, it was no wonder that she forgot her handbag all the time. Anyway, she'd begun organising her day and most likely had plans for the rest of the world before she abruptly took that turn. She had recently caught up with her friend Heather Woolcock, and they had talked about death, and she had confided in Heather that she wanted to die in her own bed in the home that Mick had built her with her family by her side. We are happy that she got that wish, but it was too soon and unexpected. As our dear friend Marg Cameron said, she would have wanted to write us all parting letters and organise this wake. Our dear friend Frank Lawrence said tearily, "You've lost the centre of your family," and he is right. She was the centre of so many lives in so many ways. We've all felt the love, the grief, and the support, and it's deeply appreciated, so much so that we could not express it adequately here. Mum gave so much to us, to our family, to our friends and our community. She knew she was loved and respected and appreciated, but I do hope there is some form of afterlife and she's able to see just how much she meant to us all. So I want to end with the love story that was Mum and Dad's life. In the last little while the world has been in chaos, Mum and Dad's love has grown deeper, and they have been the strongest they've ever been. They decided to get wedding rings remade. Mum had hocked hers early in the marriage to buy Dad's mate and guitar, and Dad had lost his early in the marriage too. So they after 66 years of marriage, they decided to get new bands. Then for Dad's 80th birthday, we as a family took a trip to Canberra to visit Dad's family history at the War Memorial and the National Archives, not to mention share some great meals and drink more wine. To surprise Dad, on the morning of his 80th birthday, Mum revealed to him the first tattoo she'd ever gotten, just across there the week before. On her hip was a love heart inscribed inside, "Pat loves Mick forever," with an arrow running through it. Same kind of stamp you would see carved into a tree many moons ago. It was just for them, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind me sharing it today. When she showed me the night before, I gave her a huge hug and said, "Oh, you're so cool." And on the next morning, from the room next door, I heard Dad scream with glee. And when they emerged, I asked Dad what he thought, and he laughed like a young man and said, "It's fabulous." Thank you, everyone, for being here and seeing her off just the way she would have wanted.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Yeah. Now, I would like the committee for the Briagolong Art Gallery to come up, please. Why don't you guys come over here, eh? Come over here.
This on you. You've already got one.
I've already got one.
Okay.
They're not going to talk.
No.
Well, they might. Come on over here, you guys. Here, this is the committee of this gallery, and they told Louisa that they wrote something, but none of them felt like they could actually do it, which is oddly democratic. I mean, it'd be Pat, right? Except. So they've asked me to read it, and the way I'm feeling today, I'm not so sure I could do it much better myself.
Take fresh.
Thank you, Mick. Here we go. What does a passion for art look like? How does it manifest itself? What type of person drives it? Our Pat is the embodiment of this person, and the reason why we are all here in the gallery today. The Briagolong Art Gallery was born from this passion, from this person that we honor today. Our friend, our mentor, our teacher, with a life force compelled to share her passion for art, education, and share her respect for the mystery in life, the unexplained, the imagined. Art for Pat was intrinsically important in life. And through her teaching and genuine enthusiasm was able to impart that essential message to us as individual artists. Every person in Pat's orbit, in a teaching capacity at TAFE, the Briagolong Fine Art School, all felt their personal expression was respected and nurtured by Pat. Throughout Pat's life, she was a scholar, constantly learning from her art and philosophy heroes, striving to understand the human condition and highlight humanity in her work. Through her own learning and arts practice, we all learned so much about ourselves and our own practice. So thorough was Pat's dedication to each and every one of us. Pat's vision for us was to find a place of our own, so as to realize ourselves as authentic artists. The big gallery was born 20 years ago. Pat understood the ultimate expression of artist's work is to culminate in an exhibition. Pat liked to put the pressure on and get the best out of all of us, including herself. Pat was always open to new forms of expression. encouraging our thinking and practice to push through our conventional boundaries and develop our authentic vision. This gallery is more than simply an art space. It is a creative expression of this arts community. Pat's vision for the community has been realized, beginning with the Briagolong School of Fine Art, developing the big gallery, and consequently the Briagolong Art Gallery in its location, which has been supported so generously by Roz and Bill Amir. Pat gathered together all the like-minded people in this area to give them a vehicle for their artistic expression. We have all found a mutual love, friendship, and camaraderie from the pulling together of these people in a very deliberate way through Pat's love and passion for art itself. Pat, yes, we are talking to you, our true, thoughtful art mother. You have given so much of yourself, your kind, gentle, persuasive words, keep going, dig deeper, have landed within our hearts and minds and become part of who we are now. And though we may be wobbly at the moment with your sudden departure, you have equipped us with the tools to carry your vision forward. We won't let you down. Love you, Pat. You are with us forever. I think any of them could have done it better than me. Yeah. Oh, thank you. And now Susan Hibberdine. Mick would like for, Susan wrote this letter to Mick, and Mick would like for Susan to read it to us here today. Yeah. Grow up.
I'm trying, hon, I'm trying. This is for Mick, for Danny, Tale, Louisa, and Wilva. In writing this, I'll probably be reiterating much of what other people have expressed. But I hope you will accept these words written in sadness. Early this morning, I walked through the labyrinth in my garden. Thank you, Pat, for introducing me to the labyrinth and to its calmative wonders. Yesterday, I rejoiced to hear that 17 Australians had been repatriated from a refugee camp in Syria. Thank you, Pat, for so clearly and compassionately illustrating the plight of those whom the Australian government chose to ignore. A squawking cockatoo, an aerial shrew, remind me of Pat's monoprint on my wall. And as I pack to go to New Zealand, I know exactly what art materials to take. Thanks, Pat, for all those wonderful overseas travels. And sorry, Leonardo, I must thank Pat for showing me The Last Supper. I will never, ever again be blasé about any piece of work of art. For our gallery, thank you, Pat. For introducing me to all these wonderful people who practice art, thank you, Pat. And for the kind, giving, welcoming community that you nurtured and shared, thank you again. Without that nurturing, I may never have produced a painting or a picture. So much in my life is and will be a reminder of Pat Waters. Her kindness, her generous spirit, her intellectual acuity, and the joy she brought to all of us are rare gifts. Vale, dear friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Sweet. Simon? Where's Simon? Yeah. And now we're going to have, so this is Simon Gregg, and he is going to read something written by Anne Greenwood, who wishes to remain anonymous, but I don't care. Anne, please wave to us, eh? Thank you, Simon.
Well, it's my very great honour to be reading these words of Pat's, sorry, of Anne's today. I hope I can do it justice. It feels fitting and very moving to be holding this gathering in a gallery which Pat helped to establish, and with so much of her work around us. She feels very present, and being present was one of Pat's gifts, whether it was in a one-to-one conversation, giving a talk, or teaching, or opening an exhibition, or in her use of the written word in both public and private ways. She brought all of who she was to the encounter. We have all been touched by Pat in the experiences we have shared with her and in our own memories of her. My own memories began when I first met Pat in 1984, when I joined the Sale Peace Group, which had been formed during the Cold War in response to the increasing threat that it would become a nuclear war. I remember in particular a meeting in the house which Mick and Pat had built for the family at Padmelon Gully, close to the Freestone Creek. I was fairly new to Sale and to living in the country, having come from a life in Melbourne. I was touched by the freedom and happiness embodied in the lifestyle which Pat and Mick and family had embraced, and in particular by this remarkable woman. I felt a bit in awe of her abundant energy, her commitment to what she believed in, her passion, her intelligence and breadth of knowledge across the issues we were all trying to come to terms with. Her work in the peace movement was extraordinary. She went far and wide to talk all right to people at all levels of society and was not deterred by status or alternative viewpoints, as she had thought so clearly through her own position and had the capacity to argue lucidly and without rancour, but she was also prepared to listen and adjust her thinking if she felt that it was needed. I met her again at various functions connected with the peace group, but didn't really establish a more personal friendship at that time, and when I later moved to work in South Gippsland, I didn't expect to return to Sale. Life brings unexpected things though, and I was delighted in 1986 when both Pat and I were asked to implement a studio textiles course in the newly formed community college in Sale, which would later become the TAFE College, and I looked forward to working with Pat and getting to know her better. It was an exciting and happy time. I shared Pat's belief in education and the capacity of art and creativity to enrich and change lives. We enjoyed establishing the course, working with the students, and in the process discovered we had much in common. And so began a rich and deep friendship and started a conversation which has lasted more than 35 years, notwithstanding the later difficulties of geography and physical limitations. The conversation deepened as we got to know each other, and there seemed to be no limits to what we spoke about. Art, of course, family, dreams, the environment, books, politics, and the work of psychologist Carl Jung, especially his concept of individuation, the idea of becoming whole, not perfect, but complete, which involves working on the shadow, the dark side of the psyche. Pat was a thinker, and her deeper understanding of the theories of Jung clarified so much for me. In one of her last emails, she spoke of the paradoxes of humanity and the continuing difficulty of bringing the opposites of life together. As the college grew, the course grew with it, and we were able to offer it on the Bairnsdale campus and run an outreach program where it was possible for people living in Far East Gippsland to study units of the course. The program ran in Lakes Entrance, in Buchan, Malakuta and Can River. Pat was a gifted teacher and brought her knowledge and love of art to so many people, on campus and beyond, helping them develop their skills and inspiring and encouraging them to develop their own artistic talents. Many of those people are still working as artists, and some are here today. While Pat brought to the job all the qualities which had been so evident in the peace movement, she brought so much more. And I began to see that what motivated Pat was love. She was grounded in the deep love she had for Mick, her rock, and her family. Her children, Danny and Louisa, brought her so much pleasure and pride. She was pleased to welcome Tale into the family, and thrilled when grandchildren came. First Thomasay and then Lisanne? Thank you. Who brought so much joy to her life. Her sister Wolva was and has always been a sustaining and loving presence for Pat, which she valued greatly. She wanted so much to help create a better world for her children and grandchildren, and this love permeated all that she did, with friends, with students, with colleagues, with the way that she taught the subjects she was passionate about, and of course in her art. It formed her approach to life. Pat saw people not in terms of who they were in society or how wealthy they were. She saw them as human beings, and her love for humanity was profound. It wasn't always easy being Pat, though. There were times of self-doubt, of vulnerability, of self-criticism, of frustration and helplessness, and anguish at what was happening in the world, and times of confusion when the way forward wasn't clear. She explored far and wide in art, in depth psychology, spirituality and religion, and in an ongoing search for understanding of the meaning and the mystery of life. No small themes there. She was able to channel much of this into her work. Many of her images are imbued with the silence which comes from the thoughts and feelings for which there are no words. Her works on the environment come from hours of silent contemplation of much of the landscape and her compassion for what was happening to the earth that she loved so much. She loved watching its light and shadow, the mist and rain, movement and stillness. In 2001, she had an exhibition at the Gippsland Art Gallery called Dialectic, where she explored her feelings for the landscape and the urgency of changing our exploitation of it. She wrote these words in her artist statement: "My immediate landscape is representative of the larger natural environment about which I care deeply. I believe humankind must now engage with the environment in a very meaningful way if the destruction we are witnessing is to stop. I know in my heart that if people immerse themselves in nature, empathy will develop and a desire to conserve will grow. This is the dialectic, the power and the beauty and power of nature permeates our being, enriching us, and we in turn move to preserve that which uplifts us. We must reconcile with our environment, and to do so will require a surrender. But as with all letting go, it will be a relief, create a sense of belonging, and bring us joy, great joy. Those were Pat's words. I find it very poignant that her last exhibited work, which was part of the Fragile Earth Extinction exhibition held at the Gippsland Art Gallery in June and curated beautifully by Louisa, expresses these same concerns using the words of 12th century mystic Hildegard of Bingen, Hildegard of Bingen, I should have known, and offering hope. Pat never gave up the good fight. Some images came from her dreams, which gave rise to the series of work she did with myths such as the Oedipus series and the Europa series, and her monumental depiction of the Stations of the Cross. Some images came from her passion for what was going on in the world, which led to the powerful works which became the Face to Face with Asylum Seekers exhibition of 2013, based on the refugee situation. So much of her pain, anger and compassion is expressed in her art, in both the very powerful works which command attention and in the quieter, more reflective ones. Pat listened. She not only listened, but she heard, and she responded, and she acted as she thought was necessary, whether that was in guiding a student or challenging authority if she thought something was unjust or unreasonable. She has left that listening in her work. It is not the time of day to be quiet with these works, but if it becomes possible, to spend time with them in silence would enable a deeper listening and knowing of this gifted woman and artist. I will miss her so very much, her wisdom and her generosity of spirit, but I take some solace in the memories I have of her and in her work which will live on, and I feel so grateful for the gift of such a friendship. Thank you, Anne. Can I just add too, Klein? Just on the subject of education, Pat and I were speaking a day before she died. I had asked her to write an article for our magazine about how important it is to have art education in Gippsland, because there's none now. The course at Churchill's closing, as you all know, I'm sure. I said to Pat, could you give me a couple of thousand words? And she said, I'll give you 10,000, I'll give you 50,000. She got all worked up and passionate and started stomping her feet, and that was Pat. And I think it's really important that, you know, Pat was the glue that held so many of us together, and she was the firecracker under our asses, but we have to keep that spirit alive, and we have to keep going with these issues. Yeah, we have to keep going. Oh, also, we're bringing back the Print Award at the gallery next year, and I was speaking to Louisa earlier. We're going to have a new prize for Best Gippsland Work. It'll be called the Pat Waters Prize. And that will be in perpetuity. So, thank you.
Thanks, son. Thank you. Thanks for that, Anne. Beautiful. Wonderful. I always, in my friendship with Pat, your name came up so often. And I appreciate Simon reading it for someone else. I don't seem to be able to do that very well, but if you ever get a chance to read what Simon has written about Pat's work, he's written quite eloquently.
Deb Milligan too, she wrote the catalogue.
Yes, and Deb Milligan wrote as well. There's lots of writing about Pat, you know, people who so respect and love her work. Yeah, so now I would like to turn it over to probably a less intellectual and more jovial perspective with one of Pat's dear friends, Dave Coate. Can we get this?
Okay.
We're recording it.
Right. Very good.
We're recording it, so don't swear.
Right. That'll be difficult. I suppose with Pat, everything I wanted to say, some other bastard said it. But there's so much to say about Pat. And so Pat came into our lives about 40 years ago. We were new settlers, as was Mick and Pat. Our kids grew up together. Our kids went to school together. We had sleepovers and babysitting duties, and it was a beautiful time. And there was lots of other new settlers in Briag. At a very, very early time in my friendship with Pat, my bond was deepening, and it was something that I couldn't quite understand in terms of what is it about this woman. Now, I aspired to Pat's intellect, and we spent hours and hours and hours talking about religion, the clergy, and all those other bastards, as Pat would exhale. And there was the dinner parties, endless dinner parties. And there was plenty of times when too much wine was just never enough. And we would go on and on. Occasionally Pat would say, "Dave, shut up!" as opposed to the chair recognises, because I never recognised the chair. And there was not a lot of other people around the table who recognised the chair. So Pat sometimes said, "Fucking shut up!" I slowed a bit. These were boisterous affairs. These were table thumping affairs. And we covered deep politics, deep philosophy, deep psychology. And Jung has been mentioned a few times, and I'm a student of Jung, and I found a fellow traveller in Pat, and we endlessly use those psychological discussions in terms of what Pat's vision was, how she saw the world could be, and I can appreciate her frustration. Pat was a shit cook. The finest host you could ever meet. Pat made sure everybody was comfortable, fed, watered, acknowledged everybody. She still couldn't cook. That was all right. She had Mick. Mick is a fine cook. There was a number of things that Simon read in Anne's letter, which while it's relevant, I want to touch on, and that was I went to the exhibition of the dialectics at the gallery at that time and listened to Pat's speech, and it was so intense. I said to Pat, "Could you give me a copy of that speech, please?" Because it touched a nerve, and it was about, and this is me paraphrasing, it was about if you want to save the environment, you have to see the beauty in the environment to appreciate it, and then you'll be motivated. And that was Pat's quest. That was her lifelong quest. Over the years, I've bought quite a number of pieces of art by Pat, and I was fortunate enough to be gifted some art by Pat. And when her retrospective was held I was privileged enough for Pat to contact me and say, can I come and take some of your works to put together this exhibition? So it was a great honour and a great joy for me to be in that position. Pat was staunch. Pat was staunch. There was no question. Whatever undertaking Pat took on, she was staunch and solid. And to just relay a brief anecdote, a few years ago, Pat was very well acquainted with one of the lead commissioners in the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse. And I observed them talking at a particular function one time, and Pat said to the Commissioner, "It is so great to have somebody like you, who I have faith in, who is running this important commission." I also observed the Commissioner saying to Pat, who she knew quite well, that is one of the highest compliments I can have, because I consider you to be a village elder. And that is exactly how, what we've heard here today, that is what Pat was. Dancing. There you go. I had a birthday and it had a 0 after it. I got my favourite country swing band together, got all my friends together, and what happened? Mick and Pat stole the show with their jitterbug dancing. They can dance. They could dance. My love goes out to Mick, Wilva, Louisa, Danny, Tale, Tomase, and Lenase. Yeah, and all the other extended family. And I know that I speak for the community when I say that. Vale, Pat Waters. Thank you.
Well done.
Oh shit.
Oh, shit.
Hello. Oh no.
It's a magnet. It's it.
Crisis averted.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, now put it on Mick.
On Mick.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Now thanks very much, Dave. You know, really the whole. Well, yes, he did. You missed it, apparently. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell. I had a little anecdote there. That show that the immigrants that was down in Melbourne. I wish there was a way to express how the people in that room were so captivated by that show. I remember it well. People just blown away by the power of that show on immigrants. It was fantastic. Pat showed her work far and wide. It's fantastic. So now, I'd really like to welcome, please, Mick, come up and talk to us, eh?
Thank you, Klein. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I was really worried about Klein here,
Yeah.
you know, hitting his head there. He was not a problem with me. Is that about right?
Yeah, and he's pretending he doesn't know how microphones work.
Yeah. Yeah, Dewey, the old, you know. The good news is I'm not going to be up here for as long as any of these other people. It's going to be all over pretty soon. But I would like to thank them all those beautiful talks, and especially my beautiful daughter, Louisa. her eulogy was fairly long, and she referred to the fact that Pat used to do fairly long stuff too. And she came, we had a little gathering at our place a few nights ago when Danny and Tale and the kids came down, and she said, you know, I'll read you what I've written so far and see what you think. And we were eating, and she'd made a pizza. She said, listen, hang on, I'll just put this pizza in the oven. And then she read us this draft of what she'd done, and the pizza was fucked. It was by the time she'd finished, we had to start all over again. I have to say some thank yous first. I started writing a bit of a list at one stage, and I thought I can't name individuals because there's too many of them, but so I'll just generalise and quite briefly all the people that made today possible, all the art group, all the people who bought the food, and all our friends and neighbours who gave us such support, and for the casseroles. And if any of you are out there thinking, damn, a casserole, should have thought of that, please don't worry. I would also like to thank people who don't get thanked enough, and they were the paramedics who tried so hard to bring about a miracle, and also the coppers who came, and once they'd established that there were no feathers stuck in Pat's throat and that I hadn't taken out a huge life policy a couple of months ago.
He was saying these jokes while they were there too.
And then I started to cry, and I think that did the trick. No, I was pretty well off the hook then. I would just I'm not quite sure whether I can do this or not, but Pat had many beautiful pieces of music and songs that were her favourites over the years, and some of which she used to say, she'd Google up the words and music and say, can you do this? And things like Andre Bocelli's Time to Say Goodbye were, you know, a pay grade quite above me, but some of them I tried to. I'm not quite sure that I can do this, but I'd like to try and sing a song that was, of the songs that I sing, this was Pat's favourite.
Do you want to come? What do you want?
No, just open. Thanks, mate. This is.
Where are you standing there?
This is not my guitar. It's Rosie's.
Do you want to play?
Got it. And because he's got a pickup and I haven't. This was Pat's favourite song. It's a goodbye song with a thread of hope through it when it says, gonna find my true love, that's where I want to go, out where them chilly winds don't blow. Going where them chilly winds don't blow, gonna find my true love, that's where I want to go, out where them chilly winds don't blow. Even in the springtime, won't be back till fall. If I don't get there, I might not come back at all, out where them chilly winds don't blow. Going where them chilly winds don't blow. Gonna find my true love, that's where I want to go. Out where them chilly winds don't blow. Sing you a love song, sing it soft and low. Sing it for you, babe, and then I'll have to go out where them chilly winds don't blow. Wish I were a headlight on a westbound train. I'd shine my light on cool Colorado rain, out where them chilly winds don't blow. Yes, I wish I were a headlight on a westbound train. I'd shine my light on cool Colorado rain, out where them chilly winds don't blow. I'm going where them chilly winds don't blow. Gonna find my true love, that's where I want to go, out where them chilly winds don't blow. Out where them chilly winds don't blow. Out where them chilly winds don't blow. Goodbye, my darling girl.
What a champion. Yeah. Let's just take a moment, hey?
A moment.
Oh, man. You're perfect. We're going to go inside and have a little bit to eat, but right now we're going to play some music. You're welcome to take a little bit of a break, but a bunch of people are going to come up here and play some music. Gary, do you have a...
Shall we jump in? You know what I'm playing? Dream a Little Dream? Yeah.
In C, yeah.
Stars are shining bright above you. Night breeze in the casino whisper I love you. Birds are singing in the sycamore trees. Dream a little dream on me. Say nighty night and kiss me. Just hold me tight and tell me you miss me. dream of me. The stars are fading, but I linger on, dear, still craving your kiss. I'm longing to linger till dawn, dear, just saying this. Sweet dreams till sunbeams find you. Those sweet dreams that leave so far behind you. But in your dreams, whatever they be, dream a little dream of me. Stars are fading, but I linger on, dear, still craving your kiss. Well, I'm longing to linger till dawn, dear, just saying this. Sweet dreams till sunbeams find you. Those sweet dreams that leave behind you. But in your dreams, whatever they be, dream a little dream of me. Thank you. Right, that's our song.
Are you going to sing a song, sweetheart?
All right, we'll just do one each at the moment. There'll be more music later when people are more
And
around.
Gary's going to do us.
Can I unplug?
Will wants me to do this,
Yes.
but can I do it with you because I'm just chunking. It's this one. It's Still the White Rose.
Can I pass the
So
yeah,
you'll
I know.
Can
know.
you just?
Yeah, yeah.
But I'll need a music stand because
We'll grab the music stand. This
Can
is.
you get the music stand for me?
Are you going to plug in my sweet?
Yeah,
In
yeah,
there somewhere.
Plug that in, then we can grab the music
Yeah.
stand.
You just went, get out there now. Right,
There we go.
I'm just going to do this and then I'm done.
Okay,
Carly, you're just going to get this on.
Yeah, okay, and okay, all right, and just okay.
I don't need to see this. I know this.
No,
song.
no, that's okay.
Beautiful piece.
It's just for me because
Yeah. No, you have it.
till the white rose blooms again, you must leave me lonely. So goodbye, my love, till then, till the white rose blooms again. Summer days are ending in the valley, and soon the time will come when we must be apart. But like the rose that comes back in the springtime, you will return to me when springtime comes around. But till
again, again. You must leave me lonely. So goodbye, my love, till then. Till the white rose blooms again. The summer days are ending in the valley, and soon the time will come when we must be apart. But like the rose that comes back in the springtime, you will return and bring the springtime to my heart. For till the white rose blooms again, again, you must leave me lonely. So goodbye, my love, till then. Till the white rose blooms again. Goodbye, till then. Goodbye, till then. Goodbye, till
Amazing Grace. Oh, sweetheart. You okay?
Yeah.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Grace that taught my heart to feel, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that's brought me safe thus far. grace will lead me home. For when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, with no less days to sing of our praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. I was blind, but now I see.
Thank you. Thank you.